host.
Why this actually heals depression or PTSD is because you have a moment of intimacy with the negative side of life. Nobody would ever say ayahuasca is a pleasant experience, right? It's a very difficult journey where the practitioner is willing to just become one with whatever is there. And if you can become one with it and you become intimate with your fear, your anger, your sadness, the trauma, the story, everything, even a single moment of intimacy with one of these emotions can be completely, profoundly life-changing.
Welcome to the Worth the Fight podcast, where we bring you powerful conversations surrounding the sensible and therapeutic use of psychedelics and plant medicines towards healing trauma. I'll introduce you to guests who, through their own personal journey and transformation, tell the Worth the Fight story. I'm your host, Matt Simpson, author of Worth the Fight, Acting for a Better World, a guide to spirituality, psychedelic medicines, and overcoming trauma. Thank you for listening. Our next guest on the Worth the Fight podcast is Kristen Ulmer. Kristen has an absolutely fascinating story. She was, at one point, 12 years running, the most esteemed, most revered female sports athlete on earth, skiing and extreme sports. And then she walked away from the extreme sports to pursue an understanding of her experiences. She was constantly putting her life at risk. And so she's got an absolutely incredible outlook and viewpoint and understanding of fear, of flow states, of PTSD, and psychedelic medicines as well. So we dive deep in all of these and cover a lot of ground in an hour's time. Kristen is the author of The Art of Fear, Why Conquering Fear Won't Work, and What to Do Instead. Her work is super poignant with what's going on in our world, and it's an absolute honor to share her high vibe insights and perspective. I was absolutely blown away by her work, her book, and this is a great honor for us to share our conversation from a few weeks back. Without further ado, I give you my conversation with Kristen Ulmer. Thank you so much for listening. Kristen, as an esteemed expert on fear, what is going on with the COVID-19?
Oh my gosh, it's such an interesting time for me because being a fear and anxiety expert, now more than ever before, we're just seeing a bucket load of fear just dumped on our heads. And there's so much more to be afraid of. The amygdala is producing fear faster than Joey Chestnut eats a hot dog. What fascinates me is that a lot of self-help gurus that are usually talking about conquering and overcoming fear are actually kind of getting more on the train that I'm on, which is at least starting with the advice that, hey, you are supposed to be feeling this right now. But what's so fascinating to me is whatever somebody's relationship is with fear before coronavirus is going to determine how they act during. For example, if somebody has a history of ignoring fear, they're going to ignore the coronavirus. If somebody has a long history of fighting fear, they're going to be at war with themselves, and then they're subsequently going to be at war with other people, and they're not going to get along with the people that they're isolating with. If somebody tries to control fear, once they realize they can't control it, then they'll try to control whatever they can control. This results in OCD behaviors like excessively washing hands, because that's at least something that they can control, because they can't control the fear itself. And somehow that limits their fear. But then they also, if they don't develop OCD, may develop controlling behavior towards others. And I see this, I was in a small town in Mexico, and there was one girl in town that was just trying to control everyone, telling online everyone how they should behave, what they should do, what they should not do. Fist fights were getting broken out on the beach because somebody would teach, and somebody that is feeling out of control with their fear would then try to get the person in control by beating the crap out of them and telling them to go home. So right now, more than ever, we're seeing the issues that people have with fear exaggerated. And this is the greatest opportunity we have, I think, in our lifetimes to forge a new, healthier relationship with fear. And that's what it's time for me.
Love that. Love that. That's very resonant with my experiences and observations. I'm seeing that this is, like you had said, it's going to further exacerbate, polarize even more. Our relationships will be exposed for what they are, and it's truly a fascinating time. We have this. I heard this slogan the other day that it's a sacred pause. What a special gift that we have to truly examine our lives and examine our priorities, examine what is important to us while we have this extra time. And thank you for breaking that down. It was great to meet you a few years back at the Flow for Writers workshop, Flow Camp with Stephen Kotler.
Interrupt you. I hate when I get interrupted, but I'm going to interrupt you because I have one
Sure.
more thing to say about COVID that you just kind of struck me that I need to say before we
Sure.
move.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
This is the opportunity where, like, see fear as a person in your life, and anger and sadness for that matter, but specifically we're talking about fear. And let's say it's a roommate that you're stuck with your whole life, and you hate this roommate and you've been fighting a war with them and you're just trying to get rid of them. And this is the nature's way of saying, okay, you and fear, go to your room and work this shit out. Right? So that's what I mean by the greatest opportunity we have. Like, can you learn how to make friends with your fear right now? And if you can't, then you're just going to have a worse anxiety or emotional health issue after the fact as an unnecessary souvenir. But can you learn how to make friends with your fear now? This is the opportunity that has presented itself.
What's your best, most useful technique to do that? I read your book, absolutely blown away by it. Thank you for putting that out and sharing that gift with our human family. I thought that there was so many angles and the ways that you look at things that are profound, novel, that I've never heard. I've read a lot of books in this subject on fear and spirituality and self development and whatnot, but there was a bunch that of things that you talked about that really stand out. But is there which I hope that we can weave in and out of our call today, but is there one practical wisdom that you can share for what people can be doing right now to have that healthier relationship with fear?
Absolutely. And we're going to have to wait to the end of the podcast for me to give those secrets away.
Okay.
Ultimately, it comes down to, if you have a troubling relationship with another human being, like I'm suggesting that people have a troubling relationship with fear, I'm personifying fear. You have to first start by recognizing what the problem is before you can get to the solution. So let's bookmark that, and then that'll entice everybody that's listening to listen to the very end, where I'll give my absolute best practical tips and pointers once we better understand what the issue actually is.
Okay, wonderful. Sounds great. It's May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and the idea of there was something about your book that was really gripping to me was how you articulated, and you did a wonderful job. You're a wonderful writer. You did a wonderful job of conveying this concept of the shift 10,000 wisdoms, this whole concept that we have. And I think we've gotten into a time where it's no longer taboo to talk about the voices that we have, the different voices that we have in our head. 10 years ago, if someone would have broached the monkey mind, that they might have been put in a padded cell, or Eckhart Tolle 20 years ago, Stephen Kotler talked about that a lot in Stealing Fire and breaking down the gradual shifts that we've done over time. But I thought that was really strong to think of it and to honor all of those respective voices and to not lock them in the basement. Geez, like no one wants to be locked in the basement. And that hit hard. And as feel like I've been bringing in and I've had a strong fear practice. Maybe I haven't called that a fear practice. I call it practicing discomfort, but honoring all of the voices, all of the impressions, all of the thoughts that we have.
So the analogy that you're referring to actually comes from traditional Zen wisdom, that we have 10,000 different voices inside of us. That movie Inside Out by Disney actually kind of captured some of it. And the analogy that I use is that imagine that you have a house full of children, 10,000 children. Half your children you've named love, joy, gratitude, forgiveness, which are really popular in our society right now. And the other half of your children we've named fear, anger, sadness, despair. And despite our best intention, will we be able to treat them all the same way? Definitely not. With our dualistic minds, we judge love, joy, gratitude as good children, and the others we judge as bad children. And so we love and nurture and show off to the world the good children, and we have gratitude practices and forgiveness practices, and choose love over fear. And so what we do with the bad children is we put duct tape over their mouths, lock them in the basement, and throw away the key. And what we do from there is actually supported by self-help gurus, psychologists, doctors, is that we continue to try to conquer and overcome them, let them go through breathing exercises, rationalize them away, all these things that we do to keep them locked in the basement. We think, I'm winning this war against fear, this perceived enemy, but all it's really doing is pissing off all of these children down there in the basement. And then now imagine that you're one of those children locked in the basement. And you're down there with no food, no love, no water, no sunshine, and your fear, your anger, your sadness, like your job is to be afraid, your job is to be angry. And next thing you know, you're more afraid, you're more angry down there until you're lashing out and burning the house down and doing everything that you can possibly do to get out. And this is where emotional health issues come from. Our judgment against the discomforts of life, or the quote negative side of life, and the subsequent way that we then treat the negative side of life. That's the analogy that you're referring to. So just in conclusion, there's two ways to live your life. And the first way is what we've all predominantly been taught, certainly here in the Western world, is you want to just love and nurture and show off to the world these wonderful children and deny these others, ignore them, whatever you have to do, control them. Zen actually is where you take all the children out of the basement and give them love and respect and consideration, and see the wisdom that all of life has to offer you, the good and the bad. And that's what our conversation is about today.
Beautifully articulated. Thank you for sharing that. The idea that if we're not giving those lower form voices their proper attention, that they're we're talking about repression here. They're going to act out, and they're going to be, and that underlies, I think, so much of the compulsive behavior that we see in the world of, people not acknowledging the dark. They're only on the light side. And I think that Carl Jung's got a quote, one doesn't become enlightened by imagining beings of light, but by making the unconscious conscious. Yeah, so I really, really love the way that you broke that down. You have an absolutely incredible story of, incredible experiences that you've had as 15 years of being one of the most prolific extreme female sport athletes, and now, having been a fear coach here for the last 15 years. Can you talk a little bit about the journey that you've had to get to this point of awareness?
Yes, it was a trip being a professional extreme athlete. And I was the best in the world at my sport for 12 years, which is a really long time. I got a lot of attention. I was sponsored by Red Bull, like the whole thing. And I think that people have the perception that these extreme athletes, you get so much attention. We are definitely getting a lot of attention for a lot of reasons, but probably the big reason why we get so much attention is because we're perceived as being fearless, which is an ideal in our society, especially if you're risking your life on a daily basis, like I was. And it's not an ideal, though. That's what everybody seems to be going for, and nobody is fearless. And I realize, after basically devoting my life to figuring out, what is the puzzle that I can put together on why somebody like me or Alex Honnold can free solo El Cap, and Laird Hamilton can surf those monster waves. What are our secrets? And the secrets are that we are not fearless. What we are instead is we have an intimate relationship with fear. And that fear actually takes us into higher states of awareness and presence. And flow, bringing the word flow into it, Dogen Zenji, a very famous Zen master in historical past, at one point said, enlightenment is intimacy with all things.
Mm.
We don't use the word enlightenment anymore. And Stephen Kotler is going to kill me for saying this, but the new word we use is flow. It's a spiritual state of a bigger experience, that transcends our mind and body. And it's the new word that we've replaced enlightenment with. So taking it back to that quote, flow is intimacy with all things. And what takes us into those higher states of awareness and flow that helps us do these incredible feats. And, Alex Honnold is rumored to have a damaged amygdala. Everybody's talking about it. Oh, he was born with some sort of amygdala problem. That's not, I've talked to him for 2 hours only about fear. Like, that's not what's happening. What's happening is that we have an inclusive relationship with fear in that we're willing to feel it.
Mm.
Now, juxtapose that against people who can't even leave the house, as an extreme example, or somebody that can leave the house but just is walking around with irrational fear or crippling anxiety. Even people who are extremely high functioning, who are doing amazing things with their lives but can't sleep at night because of the monkey mind. The fear is just circulating round and round. The difference between extreme athletes and those folks is that we have an intimate relationship with fear, and everybody else has a resistant relationship with fear. And that really is the key. And I will even go so far as to say, I've interviewed so many professional extreme athletes. Only the best of the best of the best in the world have an intimate relationship with fear. The second best in the world doesn't. They have a resistant relationship with fear. And as a result, they are more prone to dying. They're more prone to having PTSD from having, if you're going to be an extreme sports athlete, you're going to see a lot of trauma. They're more prone to having emotional issues or health issues after they're done. They're more prone to injury, and on and on and on. So we're not there yet. I would say this is very new. This is only starting to be discussed in our generation, but this is the future for us. Not only to become better athletes, but this is the future for us so that people can do amazing things with their lives and still be able to sleep at night.
So much goodness to unpack there. And I've been fascinated with the flow states and better understanding that. That's been my central quest for the last 3.5 years since I first came across Stephen Kotler's work, and trying to better understand and the rise of Superman and what the extreme sports athletes are doing and how they're retelling the story about what is possible. I think is a tremendous gift that you have, having, and you don't paint a rosy picture in your book about your past and about some of the struggles where you were doing and attaining all these things, and and it had loads, obviously, to still be here and to be alive, loads of flow that you had to again be the most esteemed athlete in your space for 12 years running. That's incredible. But now, having a kind of an outsider's looking in right now and telling the story about, how not just athletes, but all of us can engage a healthy relationship with fear, a more intimate relationship with fear, to ultimately bring more flow into our lives.
And I think even bringing more flow into our lives is in the future. I think for now, it's just getting us out of the chasm that we're in. The statistics for PTSD, I don't know what they are currently. I know at one point it was 8% of America, at least. And it's probably higher than that, because those are just people that are willing to talk about it. Anxiety disorders, 18, 19%. Think about that. Getting worse every year. Depression, I don't know the statistics on that. But okay, yes, we all like more flow in our lives, but let's back up, because not everybody that's listening, obviously, is looking to jump off cliffs for a living or surf 100-foot waves or free solo El Cap. Let's take this conversation back into the chasm that we're currently in and why we have so many emotional issues. And talking about flow, let me change analogies for a little bit. So we have 10,000 states of being, and fear is one of them, anger is one of them, sadness is one of them. And these emotions, proven by science, are supposed to first show up in our bodies just as a sensation of discomfort. And for flight, fear, like run away; for fight, anger, fight to the death, right? For compassion, for yourself and for other people, sadness. And I'm going to just limit the conversation to fear, anger, and sadness, just to keep things simple. But these are like droplets of water that are flowing through our bodies. Like, see our bodies like a hose, and here comes fear, here comes anger, and also here comes joy, here comes love. Like, all these things are coming through the hose, and starting in our bodies first as feelings, as emotions, and then they're gone. Like fear will run its course. So long as the thread is there, it'll stay there. But as soon as the thread is gone, then it's gone in 10 to 90 seconds. This is also proven by science. So let's say we go through a trauma, something really difficult, something challenging. It's like the perfect design, where the emotions are supposed to take us into heightened states of awareness and presence, and help us deal with the situation and feel something. And it's actually supposed to lead to opportunities. And we'll get into that probably later. And then it's gone in 10 to 90 seconds. And like right now, I'm going through a difficult time, and I'm just watching this happen, and I'm just being in flow with it all. But here's the thing. Take fear, for example. Anger, definitely. Certainly sadness, but not as much. If we see these things and we don't want them, and we're taught, oh, you're not allowed to be angry. Fear, there's nothing to be afraid of. Sadness, everybody apologizes when they cry in public, right? And we hate this. When we feel these emotions, we kink the hose. And everybody has their own way of kinking the hose. And next thing you know, that emotion just gets stopped and just starts recirculating round and round and round.
It's stuck in the body.
Yes, gets stuck in the body. And next thing you know, that fear now turns into anxiety. And anxiety is nothing more than fear stuck in your body, recirculating round and round when there's no more perceived threat. And we don't even acknowledge that it's fear. We say, oh, I don't feel fear, but I have anxiety problems. Well, guess what? That's how your fear is now showing up in the form of anxiety problems. And that stuck emotion will either show up as an exaggerated version of itself in the form of depression, anger issues, anxiety, panic, irrational fear, or it'll show up redirected in other ways that don't even seem like any of these emotions at all, like jealousy or self-esteem issues, or repressed fear may show up as anger, or, and this is where it gets really interesting, like water that kind of gets stuck and has nowhere to go, it'll just start spilling over into every nook and cranny, and it'll show up now in your thoughts as fearful thoughts or angry thoughts or sad thoughts, and get stuck in a loop there. And then the more you think about it, the more you feel it, and then it becomes cyclical. Thoughts lead to emotion, lead to thoughts, lead to emotion, and you have just created a hellacious internal dialogue and system and recirculating emotional issue that came just from stopping the natural normal flow of an emotion, a negative emotion through your body.
Do you think that as we wake up as a human family, wake up to some of these principles and start honoring emotions on a deeper level, and a more conscious level, do you think that our mental afflictions are that before, we'd said that 8% of the population struggles with PTSD at any given time, 18% anxiety disorders, addiction rates, depression rates. We know the sad song that affects our human family and certainly the West here. What are your thoughts on that as we wake up to some of these notions and some of these things that were taboo years ago about, properly processing, properly honoring both sides of the spectrum and creating a healthier relationship on an individual and a collective level with fear?
Well, we're not there yet. And when my book first came out, I Googled for days somebody else that I could find that might be learning how to have a healthy flowing relationship with fear like I do, versus having a war with it, conquering, overcoming, controlling, managing, letting it go, and on, or replacing it with calm, rationalizing it away. Like, these are all forms of war with it. And I couldn't find anyone. And since then, I've been keeping a list, and I've found 7 people on the planet. And
is Akshay Nanavati on your list? He wrote Fearvana. It was endorsed by His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
No, please send me his name and I'll look into it. And here's the thing, though. There are a lot of people that look like they teach Into the Sea with Fear, but when you actually investigate, they start off teaching that, like, oh, fear is normal and natural. You don't want to repress it. You know, you don't want to fight a war with it. Like, and then there's a comma, and they're like, but you don't want to let it control your life. And so it just starts off in a really gorgeous direction, but then it just takes us right back to some form of repression. And so a lot of teachers that I see out there, I get really excited. I'm like, oh, they think like I do. And then I'm like, oh, you know, because they just end by taking us right back to the basics. And how I can tell, it's actually very simple. I see fear as a person in my life. And however they're talking about fear, you know, I can really, like, somebody says, okay, here's this roommate. I have fear. It's right next to me. It's with me all the time, every moment of every day. And you've got to accept that it's normal and natural that it's going to be here. There's nothing you can do. It's just part of life. It's just a sign that you're human, right? Great. But you don't want to let them get the better of you. But right then, you're just right back at war with this person in your life. Like, I'm not going to let you hold me back, you son of a bitch. So any kind of derogatory language about fear just takes us right back to square one. And there's this saying, Confucius said this: he who chases two rabbits catches neither. And it really ultimately comes down to, and this is kind of where we're starting to head to the solution, is you have to pick one direction or another. You can't chase both at the same time. You can't try to make friends with fear, but also not let them get the better of you. You know, you have to either work towards having a gorgeous, loving, considerate, flowing relationship with this amazing partner that you have in your life called fear. And anything else is just more leading to more repression and more locking fear in the basement.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully put. I like to think that I have a healthy relationship with fear. I think we probably would all raise our hand and say that we do, you know, and there was a lot of parallels with Worth the Fight and my book and your book, The Art of Fear, Why Conquering Fear Won't Work and What to Do Instead. Again, highly recommended. I'll be putting a link in the show notes. And I came to a lot of these, realizations in a different manner. And I'm not saying I'm on your level, but I found flow healing a near broken heart. The first time I engaged flow and I felt that good macro flow was December of 2014 in an ayahuasca ceremony where I had an opportunity to go back to some dark times and repressed childhood sexual trauma and to confront the pain that I had garbled up in my nervous system that was really keeping me from living the life and being the man that I'm, here to be. And then subsequently with psilocybin, and I give that credit to I had about 6 to 8 therapeutic sessions back in 2015, 2016, where I just trusted my innate wisdom within and healed my depression with the little fungi, little mushrooms that our esteemed scientists are like, thumbs up for trauma and people that are hurting and earnestly struggling. And that was when I found flow for the first time. And then, that's why Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel's work was so gripping to me, because I was like, whoa, these guys are, there was something in their voice and something was profoundly gripping and pulled me in on this journey. But I wanted to get and I think you might have contrarian viewpoints of the power of psychedelics. If I remember correctly, some of our conversations in April of 2018, I remember you had asked, does ayahuasca even help people? Because I think you'd had known some people that might have gone down the rabbit hole or something. But I want to hear your thoughts and impressions on your thoughts on psychedelic medicines.
Let me just start by saying I'm a huge fan of psychedelic medicine.
Okay.
And I participated in all of these as well. Let me tell you why these plant medicines work in crystal clear terms to help people with depression or PTSD. Backing up. Let's say 2 people get mugged at gunpoint and one comes home and they're talking excitedly. Let's say it happened in Paris and they went to the Louvre and they went to the Eiffel Tower. They had a wonderful vacation. In the end, they got mugged. They come home and they're just talking all excitedly about it. Like, oh, and it's the most interesting thing that's happened to them all year. And they don't show their friends pictures of the Louvre or the Eiffel Tower. All they do is talk about this time they got mugged. And then there's the other person that comes home and they have PTSD and they no longer trust people. They're afraid to go out at night now. They would never go back to Paris again. Like, what's the difference between these two people? And it's very simple, the difference. One person is in flow with their emotions, the subsequent negative emotions, the fear, anger, and sadness that come afterwards, and it makes them feel alive. Like neurochemically, fear and excitement are exactly the same thing. And the other people, they don't want to deal with the emotions, so they kink the hose. And then they inadvertently give those emotions magical powers. They're stuck in their body, recirculating round and round, terrorizing their lives in unimaginable ways. You do not want to stop the flow of fear, anger, and sadness in your body. It's going to lead to aches and pains and nightmares and like all
illness. You get sick, yeah.
Right? So that's what PTSD is. And it's not that a person with PTSD is broken in need of being fixed. It's just that they're in a really bad habit. A habit that is supported by parents, by society, that's being passed down generation after generation, that negative emotions are something to be managed, controlled, fought with, got rid of, rationalized away. And so there's a ton of books on emotional intelligence out there that are teaching exactly this. And it's also the treatment for PTSD and other emotional issues is actually continuing to cause more problems.
You would just give them tranquilizers. It's crazy.
Right. Like surrounding yourself or choosing love, right? Or getting a puppy. Like, I'm not anti-puppy. I'm not anti-love. But if you're trying to have a love practice or getting a puppy to deal with your negative emotions, it's just Band-Aids. And it continues to enable you to not deal with the primary emotion, which is you're not in flow with these emotions. And so what happens when you take plant medicine is this. Like, you don't even need to go back and relive the trauma or any of that. It's just a matter of what is my relationship with my emotions as they exist today. And these plant medicines, if you're willing to go into, let's just call it the trip, and just merge with whatever it is that shows up. Let's use ayahuasca as the biggest example, because let me tell you, when you've drunk a cup and a half of ayahuasca and your demons show up, if you try to get away from them or say, no, I don't want to deal with you, that'll become an 8-hour just suffering, right? The only choice you have in those moments is to just go with it and dive into it and let it take you on a journey. And so what happens and why this actually heals depression or PTSD is because you have a moment of intimacy with the negative side of life. Nobody would ever say ayahuasca is a pleasant experience, right? It's a very difficult journey where the practitioner is willing to just become one with whatever is there. And if you can become one with it and you become intimate with your fear, your anger, your sadness, the trauma, the story, everything, even a single moment of intimacy with one of these emotions can be completely, profoundly life-changing. That's the power of having an intimacy with your emotions practice. Now, I actually created a 25 video course to help people with PTSD. I haven't marketed it yet. It's basically for people that don't want to take a strong hallucinogen, but it's basically takes them on the same journey that they would have if they took the ayahuasca or the mushrooms, where it's just leading step by step into having an experience of intimacy with your fear, anger, and sadness, where there was only resistance before.
So beautiful, so beautiful. And when we have that knowing and we have that experience and that profound, intimate moment, that's something that I believe is embedded in our DNA afterwards. And you putting together a 25-hour course for PTSD is like you're being the medicine for others, and you don't have to. People don't have to go drink ayahuasca in Costa Rica or Peru. And I think a lot of the principles that the medicine imparts are very much alive in our society. And I've had profound moments of healing and deep peace, enough that I believe, and you'd mentioned in your early chapters that we're going to see a peaceful planet in this lifetime. And you didn't say that, but you had said that there's this upswell of people yearning for global peace, yearning for love, yearning for compassion, a new way of being. And I've been gripped into this work with our war veterans, and really I think that you've done an incredible job of talking about the mechanism that underlies PTSD. And I see this incredible opportunity of we have our United States war veterans that are dropping like flies to suicide, 22 per day. That number's likely far greater. We have so many that are stuck in self-abuse and that are stuck in the opioid mess. And then we have these natural psychedelic medicines that our most esteemed institutions have greenlighted. Thumbs up, guys, like, hey, these work. MDMA assisted psychotherapy, it's not a plant medicine, is in phase 3 clinical trials with our federal government. MDMA assisted, psilocybin assisted psychotherapies in phase 2 clinical trials. That they've both been fast tracked by the FDA. The degree to which we know the dark is the degree to which we can stand in love and share our light. And what are your thoughts and impressions about, how these medicines can help our war veterans that are stuck in the PTSD? We have a bad story. As my mentor, Akshay, who is a war veteran, he says that the VA is working with a bad, outdated playbook. How do we give our warriors the love and attention that they deserve?
Let me start by saying I don't think that we'll see peace like that on a global scale in my lifetime. Okay. In our lifetime.
Thank you for clarifying that. I didn't want to put words in your mouth.
I feel like we're still making mistakes, but we're making them in the right direction. And I believe that these plant medicines are going to speed up the process for sure, especially as they become taboo and more embraced. I also want to say that I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a psychologist. I have no authority to speak about disorders. I can't diagnose people with disorders, but yet I have created a course about PTSD with, several dozen videos in it. And the reason why I did it, and I really kind of put myself out there, but I really think that it's way before its time, is because people really need help. And a lot of extreme athletes are ending their careers and they have a lot of PTSD. I mean, I watched several friends die. I've had 50 near-death experiences. I've seen hundreds of people get crippled in the mountains. It was very traumatic. I actually had PTSD after my ski career. So I feel like I have a really unique real-world experiential ability to have a platform to comment about this and create the course that I created. Actually, somebody reached out to me, a Wounded Warrior Project, reached out to me to create the course. They paid me to create it. And here's why I think that it won't happen in our lifetimes. Because doctors, psychologists, self-help gurus, and scientists, I already talked about this, are still touting conquering and overcoming of emotions. You may have an incredible moment of intimacy with your fear, your anger, and sadness, and the trauma and the experience that you went through and all that entailed while on a trip. Once you come back to planet Earth again, these doctors, psychologists, self-help gurus, scientists are going to continue to help support you. Okay, now you need to let these emotions go. And so long as there's that double-edged sword, it's like, which is it? Are we supposed to be making friends with and embrace and become intimate with our emotions? Or are we supposed to be not letting them get the better of us and trying to get rid of them and try to limit them? Again, he who chases two rabbits catches neither. So long as we have these mixed messages, this problem is still going to keep coming back. And I also have seen that, I've seen a lot of friends of mine who have that intimate experience with their difficult emotions when they're on a trip. And then they are back in real life and they don't know how to maintain it. And so they keep taking more and more drugs and more and more drugs and more and more drugs until I have 3 friends that have committed suicide now because they can't sustain it in real life because there's no support for them in real life. And so that's why I created the course. Like, how can we learn how to have an intimate relationship with our emotions? And how can we pass this on to our children so the next generation can also have an intimate relationship with their emotions? When little Johnny says, Dad, I feel afraid, the first step towards setting up little Johnny to having a future of having PTSD is dad saying, well-meaning, well-intended, Johnny, there's nothing to be afraid of. You need to let that fear go. That sets us up to having a resistant relationship with our emotions, and it'll just lead to a next generation and next generation and next generation. This has to be a across the board shift in perspective on how we view fear, how we view anger, how we view sadness. And this, of course, is a great segue into what to do instead. But I'll pause, and I'm sure you have questions.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the, kind of bringing us down to reality. I mean, we have the dream, I think, would be peace in this lifetime. And there's so many variables that have me so gosh darn excited. And the number one variable being the disruptive nature of flow and our understandings of this. And our mutual friend, Stephen Kotler, he says that we're going to need the greatest collaborative effort of people, however which way they're finding it, getting into flow and doing the things, engaging the projects that need to be engaged to engage the challenges that we have. And we know that we've already been versed in the challenges. We have the mental health crisis that we've talked about in depth, the environmental crisis, social challenges, political challenges, and the idea that the exponential power of flow is so gosh darn difficult to quantify. And so we I hold out hope that we might be surprised. And but I do value your realistic, grounded viewpoint. And I'm again wowed and proud of your work, and think that it's an integral. And like you had said, it's you're ahead. Your understanding is ahead of the times. So hopefully we will catch up to that understanding, and more and more people will be addressing the shadow side and creating intimate relationships with all of our emotions, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and so we can start to put to bed some of these ailments that we have.
Okay, so I promised a very practical description of what flow is, and I promised tips on how to have an intimate relationship with your fear, anger, and sadness. Shall we get to that now?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Right. There are 4 basic ways that I see people deal with fear. And I'm going to rank them from worst way to deal with it to best way to deal with it. Worst way is any form of resistance to it. And resistance comes in, there's 7.5 billion different people on the planet. There's 7.5 billion different resistance patterns. Some people are really in their heads all the time so that they don't have to feel the feeling of fear in their bodies. Other people are super busy. And if they slow down, then they have to deal with their fear or their anger, their sadness. Other people drink a lot of alcohol. People eat food to not deal with these unpleasant emotions. Everybody is different. Resistance is specifically taught, like I've mentioned, the conquering and overcoming fear, like that meditation app where you walk away from fear and go into a calm meadow with poppies and flowers. That's a form of resistance. Anything that is trying to get you away from your fear and not dealing with it in an honest way is a form of resistance. And let me introduce an equation that explains PTSD. Suffering equals discomfort times resistance. So let's discuss the 2 components of the equation, the discomfort first. So life is a very innately uncomfortable experience. We're all going to go through trauma. It's so interesting to just learn everybody's story. Everybody has trauma. It just is going to show up in your life. And then if you actually pick a career that could lead to greater levels of trauma, AKA being an extreme athlete, AKA being in the military, even if you're riding a bike, having children, that's exposing yourself to more trauma. Like anybody that wants to do anything with their lives, they're going to have elevated levels of trauma. It's just part of the deal. So just knowing that the suffering equals discomfort, the discomfort part is innate. It's very hard to change or control that number. Let's give it a number. And yes, you can live a life so that you avoid any kind of potentially unpleasant experience, but that's no life. So the discomfort number is kind of fixed. Suffering equals discomfort times resistance. The resistance is actually explicitly taught in our culture. So resistance comes in many forms, like I talked about. So let's say you have a discomfort of level 10, and you also have a level 10 resistance, 10 times 10, that's a whole lot of suffering. You know, that's what PTSD is. But if you didn't have any resistance to the emotions, let's say that number, the discomfort number is a 0, 10 times 0, you don't have any suffering. So I actually, in my course, propose that instead of calling it post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic stress disorder, I label actually what the disorder truly is. It's post-traumatic resistance disorder, PTRD, or post-traumatic avoidance disorder. Like if you're resisting your emotions, you're avoiding having to deal with them. That's actually what the truth of PTRD, PTOD is my preferred description.
I love it.
We're struggling with. And that way you can have a better understanding of what you're dealing with. Oh my gosh, the stress comes from the resistance. The suffering comes from the resistance because that number has wiggle room, whereas the discomfort doesn't. So that's the first part. That's the resistance. That's the first level. And the second level, which we see a lot of teachers teaching, is acceptance of your fear, anger, and sadness. And this is like sweeping, the internet and everybody is now shifting from conquering and overcoming to first starting with acceptance. You need to accept that, anger is normal and natural, sadness, fear, all of that. And then I mentioned there's a comma and they go right back to the resistance. So it's a step in the right direction. But if you notice, the resistance is oftentimes we're dealing with our emotions intellectually is probably the biggest form of resistance I see, trying to understand them, trying to rationalize them away through cognitive behavioral therapy. The second level, the acceptance, is also an understanding. Oh, I need to understand them. So this is both of these steps dealing with our emotions intellectually. In order for us to have a better future, a more promising future that's free from PTSD and other emotional issues, we need to, and this is where we shift into the third and the fourth step, deal with our emotions emotionally. And what that looks like is we need to get out of our heads and back into our bodies. And it's kind of like animals, like Bambi, for example. There's some rustling in the bushes, or maybe Bambi goes through some trauma, like gets chased by a lion. Like the fear is there to make her sharp and focused, her hearing better, run faster, better, the best athlete she's ever been. Like that's what, Laird Hamilton and me and Alex and all of us, do. Like we're just in our bodies and we're immediate about intuition, reaction, all of that. And then 10 minutes later, Bambi's eating grass in a field somewhere. She survives the attack. She doesn't have PTSD. She doesn't have trauma. Everything's fine. And she never gets in her head, like, why does this always happen to me? Like the next two steps are where we of course, we're more complicated than animals, but can we learn how to get back in our bodies? And the third level is we learn how to embrace the fear, or we learn how to just feel it, which is another way to embrace it. Can we just embrace the anger? Can we just embrace the sadness and learn how to feel it in an honest way? And what that requires is, this is no more neck up, this is neck down, like shifting out of our heads, trying to understand it, like talking about it with a therapist, and it's actually going into our bodies and finding the emotion. Where is it in my body? And learning how to have a considerate, loving relationship with that feeling. And that way it doesn't, show up in your thoughts as well. And then the fourth level is intimacy with that emotion. And that's where real magic starts to happen. That's where these emotions become like this gorgeous, gorgeous addition to your life. Like I remember I was going through a really difficult breakup once, and I had been cheated on, and I had such despair, but I had this practice, and I felt incredible anger. I felt incredible sadness and incredible fear of what my life was going to be like. And because I was intimate with all of them and in flow with all of them, it wound up being the most amazing experience of my life. I have never learned so much about myself, about the nature of the human experience. I had insights popping up like popcorn, and I was so alive with my despair. I don't think I've ever felt more alive than that year. I created my first art project for Burning Man, like all of that. So that's the fourth level. And how you get there is through the third level and through the second level. Like, you got to kind of walk before you can run, you know? So the first step is accept that, okay, it's normal and natural for me to have these really strong emotions that are really uncomfortable. Resist the urge to put a comma on that and then go back to the resistance, and instead go towards embracing. And it's a matter of like closing your eyes and getting into your body and finding, okay, where is my fear located? Where is my anger located? And mind you, somebody that's had a really resistant approach to relationships their whole lives, who are really in their heads all the time, to not feel them, this may be difficult. They may not have a healthy relationship with their bodies. So the bonus is you also then get to have a healthy relationship with your body where the emotions live. And just noticing what your relationship is with that emotion. Have I been ignoring it? Have I been trying to get rid of it? Have I been drinking alcohol to not deal with it? Getting to know your unique relationship with those feelings of discomfort in your body are absolutely the most important step, because oftentimes it's actually not the discomfort of fear, anger, or sadness that feels so bad. It's the resistance to them that feels so bad. And yes, I'm going to say that again. The awful feeling we associate with fear actually isn't fear. It's our resistance to it. It's our, I don't want to feel this way. There's something wrong with me that I feel this way. That's what feels so bad. All right, so I've been talking for a really long time. I'll just pause and I'm sure you have questions.
Love it. Love it. Absolutely love it. Thank you for breaking that down. The essence that you're imparting, really shines through from your book. And I would encourage everyone to pick up a copy of The Art of Fear, Why Conquering Fear Won't Work, and What to Do Instead. Where can people find you?
My website, KristenUlmer.com. I have a free fear and anxiety assessment. I encourage you to go take it. It's free, and it'll help you start the journey of figuring out what your unique relationship is with fear that is probably completely different than what you think.
Beautiful. I want to be respectful for your time for one more question.
I do. And I also want to give one more piece of advice before we say goodbye. So let's start with your question.
Okay, wonderful. We'll go a little bit longer. And tying in the masterful and eloquent wisdom that you imparted just a moment ago, what are your thoughts on a love revolution that's centered around healing the hearts and minds of our war veterans amid a mental health crisis? With all that you know about PTSD and, a love revolution that's rooted in patience, in kindness, in peace, in forgiveness, in rallying around them with programs like your PTSD program, with meditation programs, with programs with psychedelic medicines, with flow programs, surfing programs, throw in the whole kitchen sink at our war veterans and letting them show us the way, this new brand of love for this better world that we all, I think, innately feel like we're yearning for.
I think it's a great idea, so long as, let's say we have the soldier in the middle of the circle and they're surrounded by people that love him. I think that we need to put 3 other entities in that circle with him: fear, anger, and sadness. And so unless the love revolution is going to involve love and consideration and respect for those 3 primary emotions that is in the circle with him, then I don't think that it's going to be anything more than a temporary Band-Aid that eventually we're going to make fun of on sitcoms like Serenity Now, or, the whole choose love over fear thing. It doesn't matter. You could dump a bucket of love on somebody. If you don't have love for fear in that bucket, then it's just going to wash off of them and it's not going to penetrate. We've got to have it also include love for the emotions that this soldier is experiencing and feeling, and with complete respect and consideration for them. See it like 4 people that are really, really upset. And if you just make the soldier happy and give them love, but you don't give the other 3 love as well, they're just going to remain upset, and they live in his body. So it has to include this message of respect and consideration for all the parts of what we are and who we are. And this actually is a perfect segue into the practical explanation of what flow is, which I actually haven't told you guys yet. So imagine that soldier sitting there, and he has a kinked hose, and his fear, anger, and sadness are just stuck in his body, just terrorizing him in really obvious ways, covert ways, hijacking his mind, doing all sorts of crazy, right? So flow is unkinking that hose and being willing to feel fear, anger, and sadness, and then having that intimacy with it as well. So taking it back to at the beginning and little Johnny, right? Like, can little Johnny learn as a 5-year-old, like, okay, here comes fear, and I learn how to just feel it and embrace it and recognize it's normal and natural. It's not a sign of personal weakness. I don't need to get rid of it to have mommy and daddy's approval. I'm not going to be teased for it if it shows up on the playground. And then it runs its course in 10 to 90 seconds, and then there's room for something else to enter. And here comes joy, maybe love, right? But then here comes anger. Here comes sadness. Can we learn how to stop apologizing for our sadness, but just see it as beautiful? Can we learn to have a healthy flowing relationship with anger and use it to find our confidence and right or wrong and not be a doormat, but not, kinked hose anger shows up as screaming at people, punching holes in the walls. Flowing anger just shows up as, I'm not okay with this and I'm not going to put up with this anymore.
Sacred anger that you talked about in the book. I love that.
Can we learn how to be in flow with not just love, joy, gratitude, forgiveness, but the other children too? Can we learn how to be in flow with fear, anger, sadness, despair? And next thing you know, 10,000 droplets of water, turn into the river that takes us to the ocean that helps us be our most magnificent selves. The negative side of life, nature didn't get it wrong. It's the perfect design. It is absolutely here to help us be magnificent. These are assets and allies. And can we only see fear as a gorgeous, beautiful addition to our lives with a period after that sentence? And can we learn how to have an intimate, flowing relationship with it? That's flow.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for pulling it all together. Thank you for sharing your gifts and your wisdom and insight. And I really appreciate and value this time. And thank you again.
The last tip is this is entirely dependent upon the language that we use and how we speak about fear. Any kind of derogatory language around fear, around anger, around sadness, I call it fear shaming, anger shaming, is going to negate our potential future of having flow with our emotions. What that looks like is, like, I had a client that brought his son to the water park, and the kid said, "Oh, I don't want to go on the water slide. It's scary." And dad said, "Oh, there's nothing to be afraid of. It's fine. Like, it's not scary." It's shaming that boy for having fear. What the father should have said instead is, well, the design of the water slide includes fear. Like, it's a scary thing, and that's what makes it so fun. So the question is, are you in the mood for feeling fear right now? And if so, let's go on the water slide. But if you're not in the mood for feeling fear, let's not go on the water slide. Can we start to say, instead of conquering and overcoming fear in the same sentence, instead we turn to making friends with fear? Like, any kind of war language, I want to take out a sword and cut the head off of fear, like, that is not going to work. That's just going to piss fear off. How about we just say, I love my fear. I'm willing to feel it. It's one of my best friends. I'm like Batman. It's my Robin. We're stronger together than apart. Only kind of inclusive, considerate relationship with fear. That is going to have the biggest, most profound effect on how fast this transition happens in the future for us to have peace with fear, peace with anger, peace with sadness equals world peace.
Love it. Absolutely love it. So much goodness there. If we're retelling this story, we're going to have to be very careful of the words that we're using in the retelling of the story. And you have a masterful viewpoint of all this. And thank you again for sharing. I'm so grateful to have had this time with you. Thank you. It's been really fun. This is a great subject. I wish we had more time to talk about mushrooms, LSD, and ayahuasca. Those are like my favorite subjects. Next time around, for sure. Awesome. Thank you, Kristen. This has been Matt Simpson of the Worth the Fight podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You You can learn more about our mission of hope and healing at worththefightbook.org. Please rate, review, and share this episode. Please help us expand our circle of influence and get these vital conversations out to our human family. Also, if you are in a financial position to support the show, you can help us push forward these conversations with monthly donations on Patreon. This podcast is a tremendous amount of work for me, and I have stellar guests in the queue. Please help if you can. Thank you for listening to this programming. Much love, y'all. Peace.